too. Okay, we're back, we're live, we're here. How exciting. We're here on Global Connections on a given Thursday, and we're all connected. We're connected with Carlos Juarez. He is in Innsbruck, and we're calling this Tomorrow Now in Innsbruck. So, Carlos, welcome to the show. It's wonderful to be able to talk to you. You sound like you're in Mo'ili.
Well, thank you, Jay, and our listeners. It's really great to reconnect and have a chance to share with you some perspectives here. I'm as you note, I'm in Innsbruck, Austria, right in the heart of Central Europe, and I've spent really the last several months here doing quite a bit of travel, a lot of some lectures, some classes, but mostly traveling all around. I'm looking forward to sharing, and I want to say right now is an interesting time. I thought I was coming to the Alps to just relax, but there's quite a bit going on around here. Even Obama was just here a stone's throw away. He was 45 minutes away from Innsbruck at the recent G7 summit. And of course, Jeb Bush has just blew through town as well on his way to visit some other parts of Eastern Europe. But I look forward to sharing some insights and telling you a little bit more.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do that. We have an agenda, of some consequence here, and we'd like to learn from you what you've learned in your travels and being immersed in European news and culture. So tell us, for example, about the G7 summit that you just referred to.
Well, of course, this is the Group of Seven, as it's called. These are the top 7 industrialized countries of the world, the sort of the top heavyweights. Now, for a while, they were the G8. They used to include Russia, but last year, after the annexation of Crimea and the intervention in Ukraine, basically they didn't invite Putin last year or this year. So he was snubbed. But the other leaders gathered here. They were hosted by Germany, Angela Merkel, in a nice, beautiful little chalet here in the south of Germany. Really just a stone's throw from Innsbruck. Innsbruck is a real skinny part of Austria, just underneath Germany. And so literally 30, 45 minutes away, the summit was held there. The security was very intense. Even here in sleepy, charming Innsbruck, there were hundreds and hundreds of police officers all around. Anyhow, that went off, and of course, a lot on their agenda. Everything from Greece to the Russia issue, the UK. Interesting also just to see the diplomacy in action and how European leaders see the U.S., our leadership, and so on.
Well, what was the result of the substance of their discussions made public?
Some of it is, and some of these meetings don't really end up with any huge, profound thing. It's opportunities for these leaders to reconnect, to kind of talk in person. So nothing, no real big pronouncement, let's say. It was really just, the hot agendas being how to address and deal with the crisis in Ukraine and Putin and his role. Beyond that, just really affirming, commitments. There's ongoing free trade agreements, of course. That's an issue that is putting the U.S. and Europe, as well in Asia, a separate one. And so there's a lot of interest in those issues. And of course, these summit meetings, as you may have seen in the news, they also bring a lot of protest, those who are, wanting to be critical for any range of reasons. And so it's always interesting to see here. I must say the Germans and Austrians, because it really took place right here on the border, did a pretty effective job in managing it. Very interesting to see how really they just didn't mess around. They brought literally, as I understand it, thousands and thousands of officers there, kind of managing the crowds.
Yeah, that was in the news. I mean, there was an extraordinary number of police involved. But let's go through some of the points. Greece. Greece must be an issue all around Europe now, because it is a burden on Merkel and the rest of Europe, and everybody knows they got to pay the piper to keep Greece. But what's the feeling? Are people ticked off at Greece or what?
It's pretty interesting. There's no single voice, but I would say there is a broad consensus among those that are in the euro, and there are 19 of the 28 member states who are in the euro. I think where I find it interesting is you have some smaller states that are actually poorer than Greece. They're actually less, developed in terms of their per capita income, and they are owed money by Greece. So in many ways, some of those small players are thinking, well, gosh, no, they should have their money paid back. But it is a game of brinksmanship. You have the new leadership in Greece, a new, young, brash, very, ideologically committed left-wing president, and he's obviously, trying hard to push back and sort of roll back some of the required reforms. The Germans and the others are holding firm, and so it's really just going closer and closer to the edge. We've seen this game playing out for quite a long time now.
So is there a relationship, you think, between, what are they calling it, Grex?
Yeah, Brexit,
and Brexit? Yeah.
Yes, and here the issue is that, will Greece reach a point really of having to default and effectively actually pull out of the euro currency, and create their own? And, many people don't want to see that happen and hope it doesn't. The concern is, what would that signal for, the weakness of it? But on the other hand, I mean, Greece is a fairly small economy in the bigger picture of the EU, but really a lot of attention played on it. It is a game right now between that leadership and Angela Merkel leading the other side. But it remains to be seen. And, many are willing to say it could go either way. And if they did exit, it would be a very dramatic shock to their economy. But many are feeling, my sense is that they're feeling they're going to reach the edge, and like Europe always does, sort of eventually reach some kind of compromise and work out a deal.
Hope so, but it's to the bystander on the outside, the whole thing with Greece comes as an unpleasant, what do you want to call it, surprise.
Yes.
We thought the EU was okay. We thought the EU was all together and making progress, having a benefit in being together. But now we find that there are fractures in it somehow.
Yeah.
And I wonder your thoughts, being there, for a few months here. What are your thoughts about the strength of the EU and whether it's going to be able to hang together, or does it need profound changes to hang together?
Well, I would say first I would separate what I might call maybe more of an elite opinion, those who are really maybe either connected or engaged, whether through business or government. And really, the majority of the people who day-to-day aren't really thinking about EU. They see it, they see aspects they don't like, but where they do resist is there are growing sort of encroachment, new rules and things that, especially from the perspective of some people, are seen as just more annoyances. More generally, though, what you see, like with the Greece issue, is there's a greater, I think, understanding of this level of interdependence. And so while it may not seem like it matters in Greece, actually it does, and there is some concern that, they've got to pool their resources together. The same thing in a different way for this crisis that's unfolding with the immigrants. We'll talk about that, the migrants that are coming washing ashore, in the sense that it's putting a real challenge on, well, who's going to take the burden, who's going to pay the price. So on one hand, I'm just myself, I've been a follower of European affairs for many years, and this current crisis right now, with several things going on, you also have a separate issue that's just flared up with the election in the UK. David Cameron now with a solid majority from his Conservative Party, and they're putting on the ballot a referendum on the UK's position in the EU, and that's a different challenge, but it does, I think, it adds to this overall turmoil. What's going to come of that, and will it present a different kind of relationship for the UK with the European Union, or what?
Yeah, it's not a time for solidarity. I hope solidarity comes back soon. But let's go to the. We have many things to talk about, and before the next break, let's talk quickly about the 50,000 migrants that are trying to make it from North Africa into southern Europe and Italy specifically. There must be a lot of consternation about that.
Well, that is certainly on the headlines, and if there's an opportunity, I've shared a couple of pictures there. Number 4 in particular shows, again, typical of these boats that we're seeing wash up, and the weather is now nice and beautiful and calm, and so actually the numbers are increasing as we speak. And, in the next slide on number 5, you can see Italy. Italy is where right now the largest share of these are coming, and they've got a heavy burden. The number is just, increasing more than ever before. And I guess the big question is, is this, any of these immigrants who show up in the European Union soil as they're doing, I mean, they're literally, washed, being picked up, they can claim asylum, and that country has to then take care of them. But Italy is reaching, I think, a point of really needing help and support. But there is no clear consensus on that. It's a delicate issue. Who will take the refugees? Who will pay for it? Who will organize it? Because the European Union doesn't have a navy. It doesn't have, a rapid reaction force. It has to figure out which members are going to do what and who's going to pay for it. And those are not easy issues. And where do these refugees go? Some countries have many, like Sweden, and even Germany has taken a fair number. But where will they go and how? It's quite a challenge.
Yeah, well, do you see reaction? Are there people saying, we don't want them, don't bring them here, we have to change the law to block them, keep them out, make them go somewhere else?
Not for these particular ones. Most of these, as we see now, are really coming from some tough, these are refugees coming from some very, tough, either war-torn areas or facing really bleak circumstances. By the time they get to North Africa, if they're coming from sub-Saharan Africa, I mean, they are, and not only that, there's a huge number of them who are actually quite skilled and educated. I mean, not to say most by any measure, but so many from all these areas. You know, the issue of immigration is always sensitive. It always flares up when you've got tight elections. And most certainly there's been a rise in some of these, you know, right parties, far-right parties, anti-immigrant. But I want to say this current crisis, it just hasn't really been, I want to say, they haven't figured out what to do with it. It's not like people are wanting to push them back. The main crisis is who's gonna help do, or who steps up to help actually solve it in the immediate here and now.
Yeah, but there's a pressure here because, in fact, those boats are out there on the Mediterranean. Those boats are landing along the coastline all through the Mediterranean. And while they worry and wonder what to do about it, it's happening, no?
Yes, no, and the news is there to kind of pick it up for us, and so it's in our, you know, everyday. So it is definitely, that is reaching a crisis point. And Italy, you know, there's a recognition, I think, growing that, you know, they need help. They can't bear the entire burden. They need help with, you know, the resources and logistics, but more importantly, where to put the people after they've been processed. You know, and they're not all going to be shipped back. They're going to, some will probably remain in limbo, but others have to be given opportunities to perhaps seek asylum, refugee status in some European country.
Yeah, it's all about displaced persons. It sounds like what was happening after World War II with, you know, people all around the soft underbelly of Europe and the southern coast of Europe.
Huge movements. I mean, this is not the first time. I mean, this is a process of what happens, and it is, I think, for those of us who try to make sense of the world, this is really what illustrates the global economy pushing things. Also, some of it is just the result of war and you know, instability, states that cannot provide, and so on. But certainly a lot of it, at the end of the day, immigration is really a push and pull factor. You have issues that push people to come from their home, but the European economy pulls them, of course. There are opportunities, people who will need to bring them here.
Yeah, that's you know, the best place they can go, and now they need it. But you know, one thing that strikes me, and I don't know how much has been in the press in Europe about this, is that in all of these effectively unidentified anonymous people, there are many Muslims, and there are many people who could be ISIS, you know, in disguise. I mean, it's all the concern in Britain about all those young Muslims going, you know, to ISIS, and then worse yet, coming back from ISIS with a plan to do terrorism. And I wonder if you know, Europe in general has that same kind of concern.
Well, you know, just related to that, we've seen now more and more countries showing numbers identifying individuals who are leaving from their home countries, from England, from Germany, even Austria, Italy. They already know now how many hundreds or dozens have been, you know, going to fight, and that has really, again, probably heightened some of the security concerns, and even the issue of these migrant workers, that are coming in the Mediterranean. I mean, how do you effectively process them and make sure that you've got a clear picture of where they are, who they are? It's a real sensitive issue, and it's coming home here. Okay,
we're going to take a short break.
Yep.
That's Carlos Juarez. He's in Innsbruck. We're calling this Tomorrow Now in Innsbruck because he stayed up late. It's 1 o'clock, actually, in Innsbruck, and he joins us on Skype, and we are delighted to have him. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia, and by Asia we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island. I work in the ER there. But on Tuesday afternoons, I get to come and spend 45 minutes to an hour with Jay Fidell and the ThinkTech staff. They're terrific professionals. They help us to bring some of the leading cutting-edge topics here across our state to you. So you can join us at our show on healthcare in Hawaii to talk with leaders from across all the spectrum of health in our state, or you can join us for any other show where we talk about economic development or tourism or some really eclectic programs too. So really, we'd love to see you here on our show. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for supporting us.
We'll talk about the Fulbright and your travels over the summer. Okay, we're back. We're live. Are we back? Yes, we're back. We're live with Carlos Juarez. He's in Innsbruck, and we're calling this midnight, actually tomorrow in Innsbruck, because it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and we really appreciate him staying up. And let's find out more about Carlos's travels this summer. Carlos, you're there on an HPU Fulbright travel program. How does that work, and where can I sign up?
Well, I've got space in my suitcase, but no, what it is, it's the Fulbright program, which is actually sponsored by our U.S. government. As you mentioned, HPU, I'm a professor here at HPU, but Fulbright is one of our longest-standing and most prestigious programs for international educational exchange. This came about after World War II, and every year we have an exchange of scholars and students who have opportunities to travel, work, study, and in my case, teach and do scholarly activity here. And I'm very fortunate to be in Austria, which actually this month right now, celebrates the 65th anniversary. 1950, the program began here, and it's been exciting to be part of it. Right now, as we speak, for example, each country, and we operate the Fulbright program in most of the world, each country has a slightly different program based on their needs. So Austria, for example, this year we have about, I want to say, 18 professors that are here in different universities, and maybe another 10 or 15 graduate students. Quite exciting. And the program allows me, connected here, affiliated with an institution, which is a university here in Innsbruck. I do some lectures there, and then I also travel quite a bit. I've been invited to give some lectures, spent a week up in Norway. My first visit there was sensational. Initially to the University of the Arctic, way up in above the Arctic Circle.
Oh, great.
And got to, really get a better sense of that country, quite a special place. Otherwise, I've had other travels around Germany, Slovenia, Denmark, Sweden, but in particular, another week I spent was in the Baltics, a place I had not seen. And these are the small 3 states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. They were, of course, part of the Soviet Union, even though the U.S. government never formally recognized it. But these are, like much of this region of Eastern Europe, these are new countries now in the last 25 years, independent. And given their status, these were, again, part of the Soviet Union, quite a bit nervous about Russia. These are states that, when developments happening now in Ukraine are very nervous. I had a great opportunity. If we can show a map, I think number 6 I have here, it shows the Baltic states. This is, a region right up in the north.
Yeah.
And this very interesting. These are small states, 2, 3, 4, 5 million people. And especially, I initially stayed a few days in Estonia, which was remarkable. What's considered the most connected country in the world. Everybody's wired, and it's got a quite an amazing turnaround they've done in the last 20, 25 years.
You remember that Skype was invented in Estonia?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we are using their technology.
Yes.
It is like the Finns that are very closely connected to them. They're one of these small societies that is very good at adapting new technologies. They're very savvy. And the other part is they have languages like Estonia and in Finland that are very hard to learn. So all of them speak English, of course, and it helps because it would be very hard otherwise. I had a short visit in Latvia, of course, and some of these states, Latvia, including Estonia, there's been a lot of activity recently with military training exercises. These are members of NATO, the NATO alliance, and so together with the U.S. and the rest of Europe, they are the sort of the front line against the Russian bears. And if anybody knows the Russians, these Baltic states most certainly do. They were basically under that umbrella, and they fear them. They're very concerned about what they see developing, especially in Ukraine. I had a wonderful visit there with the military academy that hosted me. He gave some lectures to their military officers. Very pro-American, of course, a small state that depends today on our blanket of security. Had a wonderful series of meetings. If I have a couple pictures I can share, I think numbers 7, 8, and 9. I met with the Minister of Defense there. Actually facilitated one of our alumni from HPU about 5 years ago, who worked here with Pacific Forum sometime, Gintare. She's now a defense analyst and assistant to the Minister of Defense. She's in some of these photos here. We're talking story. He's providing gifts, and of course, he's a very interesting man. He's actually a medical doctor by profession, but he's twice been the defense minister. We had a little selfie that we took at the end. He was very gracious, very intense, and amazing. He gave me a full hour meeting to just talk story and learn about their issues. The part that was quite remarkable and quite a surprise in Lithuania, at the very tail end of my visit, I was told, hey, we have a special invitation to a performance, and it turns out there's a 2-year-old hula halau that basically performs and is growing with lots of keiki, and they put on an amazing performance that I was fortunate to be in the front row, and I was then invited to say a few words, and it was quite emotional, quite exciting to see the spirit and real passion they have, and of course, again, a country that has had a tough past and a violent history. Today, they're very concerned about their security, but through this halau, these women were saying, hey, we're here to promote peace through aloha, through the spirit of this hula dance, and it was so wonderful to see.
Did you show them the hula? Maybe you did a little dance for them?
Well, they were the ones that could show me. I mean, I was just able to appreciate it and really enjoy it. And what I really liked is a group of women about 2 years ago started it. And pretty soon they said, well, we have all these children. What do we do with them? Well, let's bring them on in. And so they have a lot of children who are in the halau, and they performed as well. And here, and again, Vilnius, Lithuania, who would have guessed that the spirit of Hawaii is alive and well?
Oh, that's fabulous. What a trip,
Yes.
Carlos. When you come back, can we go into greater detail on each of these destinations?
Oh, absolutely. And many of us now, I've got about a month left. I have some travel to Switzerland over the weekend, visiting an interesting school teacher who was in Hawaii a year ago, and we're kind of reciprocating this cultural exchange. But then I have another final visit to Poland, to Krakow, Poland, for a conference next week, a security conference. And again, interesting to see Poland today as a very important regional power today. If you look at an interesting factoid, I mean, we know Ukraine today is in deep crisis, and the struggle between, does it become European, does it stay with Russia? But if you looked at a snapshot 30 years ago of Ukraine, big country that it is, and Poland, similarly big country, they had about the same per capita income and level of development. This was before the fall of communism, perhaps 30 years ago. You look today, and Poland is 3 times per capita income, and part of the European Union, a NATO ally, and even today the president of the European Union coming from Poland, whereas Ukraine is, of course, still laggard and really not ready for prime time. Now, I'm not suggesting there's an easy answer to that, but certainly Poland benefited substantially from the European Union. Lots of investment from Germany, lots of integration now into the bigger European markets, and a very open society, too. That's another key element.
Carlos, I'm glad you're going to Poland. I'm glad you haven't been there yet. And I have a friend that I would like to, offline, I will give you his contacts. He lives in Krakow.
Oh, excellent.
And he comes here a lot. He's making a movie about his life, and his life included 5, count them, 5 death camps in Poland when he was a kid.
Wow.
And you will really enjoy meeting him, and he can show you the camps.
Wow. No, I look forward to it. No, I've had the fortune of several trips to Krakow, one of my favorite cities. It's so beautiful. And, of course, visiting the nearby death camps at Auschwitz. I've had two
Auschwitz is where,
and it is such a powerful place to see. And the contrast is, of course, the death camps are just morbid and just gruesome, and yet this other city of Krakow is just spectacular. It's one of Europe's most intact and beautiful medieval city centers. It did not get touched in the war, which was astonishing because so much of Poland was literally flattened. And you see Warsaw today, kind of just a urban sprawl, but it doesn't have the charm of Krakow. And so this is a special place, and most certainly I look forward to it. I'll be there next week for about 4 or 5 days, and I welcome a chance to meet with your friend.
I will send you contacts by email. But let's go to the Ukraine for a moment. You mentioned it a couple of times here, and it is of great concern. And you mentioned also that the G7 summit did not want to have Putin.
Putin was not invited, of course.
And they see him as the bad boy. But life with Russia seems to be changing. I mean, even during the period that you're there, there seems to be an evolution, a sea change into an animosity, an intentional animosity that he's creating with Europe and the U.S. Can you talk about that?
Well, it's just interesting because he is, of course, he's been a leader now of Russia for quite some time. He stepped down, kind of sort of played musical chairs with Medvedev, who's the prime minister, but he's effectively been there now for a good, 10 or 15 years at least. And, it is now a situation where he has been ostracized by the other Europeans as a result of the actions he took last year in Ukraine, annexing Crimea, the peninsula, which is effectively, a done deal and not likely to be reversed by anybody. Perhaps what's continuing to fester and bother the Europeans is the role of Russia, which is apparently said to be quite direct in supplying and supporting, rebels that are fighting in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine. And so, we've got now a series of sanctions that the European Union and the U.S. are putting on Russia, but many are asking, well, is it really changing its behavior or what? You can't help also but realize, as we often need to, put yourself in his shoes. I'm not trying to justify or explain it, but he has a very different worldview, and in many ways, some are looking at how years ago there was sort of a tacit understanding that Ukraine was kind of a buffer zone. It's a borderland, as the actual word itself, Ukraina, means the borderland. That's sort of a buffer, a natural buffer between what is essentially the rest of Europe and Russia. And in effect, by kind of continually trying to woo and attract them to become perhaps part of the European Union, it has really meant, and potentially even NATO, that has really sort of crossed the line for the Russians. And they've obviously taken this very assertive and aggressive role. We try to read into this. Boy, I can remember 30 years ago, as a graduate student studying about world politics, and we were trying to understand the criminologists, were giving us insights into how the Soviet Union worked and functions, and even our best experts could not predict the way things fell apart and then how quickly the Soviet Union collapsed. So even today, we have to be careful to really know, okay, what are the likelihoods? Because one thing I find fascinating, while there is this game happening and a challenge against him, on other issues we have to cooperate. So he meets, with Kerry or somebody else, and we're talking about Syria because Russia has a key role there, and we can't solve that problem without their cooperation. There's also trade issues. Many of the European countries are deeply, deeply dependent on Russian, supplies of oil, and so they have to balance, how far to push with continuing those flows of oil. So fascinating part about world politics is that you've got several games going on, different levels, conversations, all at the same time. You're screaming at this one, you're cooperating on that one, you're trying to move forward on this other. It's really quite an interesting phenomenon.
Well, one thing, he's distanced himself on diplomacy in the sense that he's made various statements that are patently untrue,
yes.
Including a number of statements about his intentions and activities in Ukraine. Where he said that it was going in for humanitarian purposes. It turns out that he was actually just trying to take territory. I think in the end, you suggest in the end he'll have his way, but his credibility is way down. And I think in a diplomatic sense, somehow it's changed. Our relationship with Russia, where we thought that one day they would be our buddy, has changed. We don't see. I don't think anybody sees Russia as being their buddy now.
Yeah. That's right, and things could follow different ways because even with the price of oil falling, it has put a pinch on their economy. We had a few months ago, shortly after I arrived here, the murder of this opposition leader that was quite dramatic, and sometimes little incidents like that, although that seems to be now fading behind, but you never know whether something might flare into something more dramatic. But as I said, what's a puzzle to me is you've got several games going on at once and conversations and deals, and but most certainly it is a very low time in Russian, European, Russian-American relations, and most certainly we are seeing, Putin being ostracized. How long or how effective, and ultimately we'll have leadership changes in different countries. Obama will be gone, after a year and a half, and will Putin still be there? We know he's quite popular back home, but part of that is that, it's the nature of their political system. There are very few real opportunities for opposition candidates to gain enough support, and many who benefit from his power obviously prefer the status quo than some uncertainty.
Okay, well, we're going to take another break. Carlos Juarez in Innsbruck, and let's call it midnight. We had a number of names here for this show.
Tomorrow is now.
Tomorrow in Innsbruck today, whatever it is. And he stayed up till, it's 1:30 in the morning there now. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. We'll talk to him some more about, sort of the general things he's learning on his Fulbright. Want to hear about that? We'll
absolutely.
Be right back.
Aloha, my name is Miley Scarpino, and I'm the host of the Empower Hour. If you're interested in health, nutrition, fitness, here on the island of Oahu, want to learn more about places to train at or different trainers available, then watch my show on Fridays at 3. We have a great time, and I hope that you'll come join us. Much aloha. Now go get swole.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon. And on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're having a wonderful chat with Carlos Juarez in Innsbruck. He's there on a Fulbright this summer, and we can't wait for him to come back. We'll be able to, get even more information from him. But for now, we're getting a report on many things that he has seen and done in his time in Europe this summer. So, one of the things I wanted to catch up with you on, Carlos, was, what is it like with the kids, the people, the students, in the lectures and the contacts you had? What kind of, what's the spirit of the place? How do they see the U.S.? How do they see the issues we've been talking about? How do they see the world, if you will?
Yeah, no, very interesting. And primarily I've done my teaching here in Innsbruck, in Austria. However, a series of guest lectures that have given me a chance to also interact in Norway, in Germany, Slovenia, and in Estonia, and Lithuania. But even here in Innsbruck, Austria, again, which I think is representative of a lot of what's happening in Europe, there's a great deal of mobility, so that the students I have here are a mixture. Some of them are from Austria, and they tend to be from this western region, Tyrol, which is, a very particular part of the Alpine country. But I'd say a half of them are their international students. And today, most European universities have a lot of student mobility. They'll spend a semester or two at other places quite easy, get support for it. So I have students, amazing. I had one class with 23 students from 18 countries, all over. They were from India, Kazakhstan, Iceland, Poland, Portugal, France.
How about the U.S.?
Yes, 2 or 3 thrown in there from Florida mostly. And partly because this particular class helped to support sort of a business tourism class, and the students came in from different areas like that, and sort of, but just fascinating to see. And on one hand, there is this greater convergence that is, I won't say it's entirely a European identity, but on some level it is, that these students work and interact more and more with other, Europeans from other countries, from Turkey, from, again, Spain and everything. And while everyone has their own respective identities, of course, their national identities that give them pride, there is, I think, a growing sense of a European identity that is emerging in many of these. And in particular, that because of their mobility and just the way that they interact and get to work with these others, they think beyond and if anything, there's a disconnect between if they come from a small little town, once they've seen the world, like everything, much like these experiences of doing Fulbright, they are transformational. Yeah. And these students, I think today, this new generation, they're eager to want to move and go about. They're also, it's interesting about the United States. I mean, there obviously are, different perspectives. Some of them very knowledgeable in some areas. Certainly the more northern European countries, I think. What's fascinating, I always look to see, is language too. And in some countries, particularly, let's say the Nordic Scandinavian countries, they listen to all of our television and movies in the English language, and I think it helps them develop a better understanding. Some places, like Germany, like France, like Italy, actually tend to dub everything, and I'm noticing that I think it impacts their language skills and their understanding of our idioms and customs.
What do they think about politics?
It's difficult to say. I mean, you have some, if they're very politically engaged, they tend to be very critical, very, sort of perhaps left of center, leftist, very strong. But that's certainly not entirely always. There's certainly some powerful, voices on the right. But for the most part, a very critical view, I would say. And interesting, Obama was just here recently. I think there continues to be, even though maybe not the excitement of his first, years in office, but there's generally understanding here that he's a very, positive influence for the country and a positive role model. As you may know, just a few days ago, we had Jeb Bush, the one who is not quite a candidate yet, but I guess he's going to tell us next week, passing through town, getting his foreign policy credentials. He was in Germany, I think, off Poland and a few other places. And the challenge there is that for many, they don't really know who he is. And then when they think Bush, they go, wait a minute, isn't he the one that there's a very negative perspective about U.S. Intervention into Iraq? And so I think he's probably, for European public opinion, not likely to woo as many other than those maybe from more conservative, parties. And here he was in Germany, of course, hosted by the Christian Democrats, who are in control, and there are a right-of-center conservative party.
What do they think about our pivot to Asia? What do they think about the U.S., U.S. involvement in things in Asia?
You know, that is also a puzzle. You know, is it real? What does it mean? And I think what it sends for some Europeans a signal is that a growing realization that the U.S. is probably no longer going to be the preponderant role that it used to be. You know, after World War II, I mean, we literally, you know, sat here. And something that fascinated me, I mean, I've always known about our deep involvement in Germany after the war and helping transition and many military bases. I was a military brat myself. I lived in Germany in the mid-'60s as a little boy. But interesting to see that even Austria, this place I'm at here, I didn't know as much of the history, but for 10 years it was occupied by the same Allied forces. And they did not become a free and independent new Republic of Austria until 1955. And again, just those stories are fascinating because when you look at different countries, often their image of the U.S., some of it is shaped by the, you know, where things ended up. And I guess what I want to say in general is the post-communist states, the Czech Republic, Poland, you know, the Baltic states, by and large, there tends to be a pretty strong, you know, pro-U.S. perspective. They see, you know, the end of communism and the openness as an opportunity to get support from the U.S. And there's always been a lot of affinity for American culture, and that's very real. In some of the, maybe the Western European countries, it varies. I think it's increasingly more generational, so that the older generation who perhaps remembers more the U.S. role in the world wars is more appreciative. The younger generation, a little bit more cynical and maybe not as connected.
You know, Carlos, one of the big things that must be in the air, especially you know, in southern Europe, is the ISIS war, if you will, and worrying about it. Worrying about ISIS is coming to a place near you to do something horrendous. And I guess there must be discussion about that. What are the people in Innsbruck and the other places you visited this time? What do they think about ISIS? Are they threatened by ISIS? How do they see the future with ISIS at their doorstep?
You know, I think the real concern is that they see there is a link, a connection, that increasingly there's evidence of many going from European countries, many disenchanted who grew up, children of immigrants, and suddenly now deciding to join this, you know, violent extremist, approach. Moreover, you've had now, beginning actually a couple years back, a dramatic crisis of a homegrown type in Norway, for example, the killing of a number of dozens and dozens of young children, well, you know, young teenagers that were part of a political party there. And what that meant for a country like Norway, actually, while I was there, it was amazing. The big discussion was whether the cops, the police, who, since that incident, now they carry guns. They didn't have guns before. After that incident, I can't remember, it was several years ago now, where this, you know, Norwegian guy killed many. Well, they're debating whether they need to go back to get rid of the guns, or others are saying, well, wait a minute, no, I mean, maybe the world has changed where we just don't have that luxury. Mm-hmm. Now, beyond that, I think there's a growing realization that this is one of these areas that they must take seriously and cooperate and try to coordinate through a lot of intelligence gathering, a lot of trying to, you know, preempt things because you can't sit around and wait. Again, the other incident in Paris that happened earlier this year, the Charlie Hebdo, I mean, these are things that are not abstract. They are very real. And so as you go to different parts here, it's not uncommon to see very heavily armed, guards, not everywhere, but certainly in critical places. And the summit meeting here last week for the G7, I mean, I've been in Innsbruck now for a little over 3 months and, saw a few cops here and there. I saw, dozens and dozens of them, very, very well prepared. And these countries, I think, are increasingly aware that the world has changed and they have to be a little bit more, focused on that. Now, beyond that, are there targets? I mean, there always will be. I mean, even in Copenhagen, Denmark, charming city that is. It had a few dramatic violent incidents some months ago as well. So it is there. It's very real. And I think it's one of these things that going back to the U.S., I think the Europeans increasingly realize the U.S. is not going to solve all their problems either, that they've got to figure out how to work this out. And that's never easy because you've got so many different layers and governments. There is no European Union police. It has to be the individual states who come together to cooperate.
And that raises, I guess, for me, the question of how the Europeans perceive what happened in Ferguson, what happened in Baltimore. Have you seen feedback about that?
Yeah, and I mean, for many, it is like almost as if, well, here we go again kind of thing. There's a very, I think, wide realization for those who are, let's say, are keen observers of American domestic politics that we do have a society where police, brutality, where discrimination, where race relations remain a very sensitive issue. And yet, juxtaposed with the reality that, yeah, we've come a long way. We've got elected officials at the highest level. And it is a very, dynamic, open society, but very clearly one where we still have some real challenges in terms of social and, these sort of urban issues.
Well, Carlos, it feels like you're sucking this stuff up like a sponge, and that you're absorbing the whole European process on a daily basis. A two-way street. You get from them, they get from you. And yes, I wonder if you could take a risk and tell me the one thing that defines your intellectual process over this trip. What is the thing that strikes you most profoundly in all of it?
Yeah. Well, that's a tough one. One thing, I've been fortunate to be traveling quite a bit now to Europe for the last 12, 13 years. But I think this visit now has allowed me, I've been studying a lot of it, teaching about it, learning some of the history, but now kind of to connect that more to the particular places. So I'm finding myself rereading a lot of the earlier history that, I tended to be more of a modern, maybe, 20th century person, but this is a place so steeped in history that the stories are amazing, and I want to dig deeper, and I find myself just fascinated by that. History is alive and well. You can go to any little town and read their story, and however far back they go or how they nurture it. I love to see that because I think it's important anyway to just get so much more out of it. So I continue to be fascinated with how history is alive and well here. And then when you think of it that way, all the crazy things going on in the world, guess what? It's been going on before. We just have better technology that brings it to us instantly now. And it doesn't mean it justifies it or anything, because clearly we hope we're moving to a better world. But, when you look at the big story of history, and especially this part of the world that has seen so many, changing borders and names and leaders and empires, history is never dull. There's always something you can get excited about.
No, it is certainly with you. You are so excited and really enjoy your energy about this. And when you get back, I'd like to ask you how you really feel. Yeah.
No, and part of any time you do these exchanges, the re-entry, the sort of the culture shock of going back is critical. And you need to debrief. You need to share. You need to talk, at least until people get tired of hearing you. But I have a lot to share and look forward to reconnecting as well. I'll be back in early July, so winding down my last month here, and very grateful. And this Fulbright, again, the core program is, the mission, if you will, is to increase mutual understanding between people of the U.S. and the world. And so I come here to learn about them, but I teach them about the U.S. as well, about Hawaii. That's always exciting because it's exotic. Here I am, a Hawaiian, American, Mexican. It's very confusing. But also, when I come back, I continue to share what I've learned about this place, about Austria, about Central Europe, and I look forward to that.
We look forward to talking to you and seeing you again, Carlos. I hope the rest of your trip is equally productive. That's Carlos Juarez from HPU. Today in Innsbruck, joins us by Skype at almost 2 o'clock in the morning with insights from Innsbruck. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Aloha.
Aloha.